call this meeting of the Planning Commission to order. Establish that we have a quorum of 6 of 7 so far. We're going to have Conley lead us with a prayer and the pledge.
Bow your heads, please. Lord, thank you for bringing us here together safely. Thank you for recent rains. We pray for safe travels over Thanksgiving. And we thank you for allowing us to live in the greatest country in the world. We pray we do your will. In Christ Jesus' name we pray, amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, consent agenda. The Commission may request for a consent agenda item to be moved to the regular agenda for presentation and public comment. Otherwise, the consent agenda will be considered in one vote. Consideration of approving the October 15th, 2018 Planning Commission regular minutes. Do I have a motion?
Moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. 7-0. Regular agenda, subdivision plats. The Planning Commission has final authority for approval. Appeals may be directed to City Council. Trinity West, Section 3, resubmittal. Public hearing and consideration of a resubmittal request for approval of Trinity West, Section 3, being 3.353 acres located south of the intersection of Merrick Street and Canadian Street. Mr. Fisher.
Morning, Planning Commissioners. Jeff Fisher, Senior Planner. First case today is a resubmission of Trinity West Section 3. This plat was approved by you all on August 18th, 2013. I guess for different reasons, the applicants here, it had expired within the 3-year window. They're now ready to proceed with the conditions of approval, and so they've resubmitted it. No changes. It's still 3.353 acres. It's 18 residential lots. This is the last phase of Trinity West, so it'd basically be just these 9 lots on either side of Merrick Street. Merrick Street would extend down to Twin Mountain Drive. This planning division is requesting sidewalks along the bottom of 24 and 28. There's a Lamar Elementary School as you go further east, as well as a storage facility that's already got a sidewalk there. So we'll get to that quickly in a minute. Staff looked at conformity with our current policies, the comprehensive plan, the future land use is neighborhood, so it's single-family residential RS1 zoning, so that's compatible. It also conforms with our intent of purpose statements in our subdivision ordinance. As mentioned, it's the final phase in Trinity West, and it'll provide a logical extension of Merrick Street down to Twin Mountain. All the lot sizes are roughly the same, 60 by 120, so that's compatible with the current lot configurations in the area. And finally, we looked at conformity with the preliminary plat. As you can see, the original plat, this part of the original preliminary plat in 2006, is 18 lots of this area, and there's still 18 lots here. Some of the lot sizes on the preliminary plat were adjusted a bit by 5 feet either way. That's why you see that irregular jog there. This is actually making it better because the lots are straight across the street and provides a logical configuration and even. Our rationale for sidewalks, I think the visually drawing says it all here. These are the current sidewalks along Toy and Canadian Street and also along the east side of Southland and Twin Mountain here. So having these sidewalks here would just provide a shorter gap and an extension here. If kids are, in this neighborhood here or here, can easily just walk to school, and also just for pedestrians in the area. So we're not requiring sidewalks as you go further north on Merrick Street because Phase 2 and 3 of Trinity West didn't have any, so it wouldn't make sense to add them here. So it's just those little short spaces there. Staff recommends approval of the resubmittal of Trinity West Section 3, subject to the 8 conditions of approval in your staff report. Here's a summary of the conditions. This concludes staff's presentation. Any questions or comments?
Anyone have questions for Mr. Fisher? All right, let's open it up for public comment. Anyone speaking in favor or against the case, please come forward, state your name.
Good morning, Russell with SKG Engineering. We'd just like maybe some clarification and addition to the conditions of approval. Item 3, we'd like to include the ability to provide a financial guarantee. And then on item 7, it's duplicated of 5 and 6, because 5 and 6 says water main and required service connections for both water and sewer, and then 7 says provide necessary water and wastewater service lines. So we kind of have replication there. So, but item 7 doesn't allow for a financial guarantee to be placed, or is not listed specifically on here. It is required, or it is allowed within the subdivision ordinance, but I'm not sure how staff would consider that if it wasn't listed specifically on here, kind of like what they do for item 2. They speak about allowing these alternatives. So we just like to have that clarified. And then back to item 2, about the sidewalks. It says the second alternative would be to allow submission of these plans and installation of these sidewalks to be deferred and constructed prior to final certificate of occupancy. Is that an alternative? Wouldn't you approve this with the conditions? Is that second alternative approved and thus allow us to do that? So that's kind of our questions, comments for this, and be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Okay. You've raised several questions, so I'd like to address them kind of individually here if we could. Sure. First, on the hydrant. Are they allowed to defer or provide a financial guarantee for the hydrant?
Item 5, there again, it's replication. Item 5 says and hydrants, so. But the city staff is box checkers, and when we come to file the plat, if we can't check that box, and although it's listed down below it, they're going to say, well, it doesn't say that you can provide a financial guarantee. I hate to be this way, but we have to be this way. If it's written, we're going to have to follow it because staff has to be able to check it off. So this is kind of trying to start a precedent of maybe being thorough and consistent in how we do all of these things, and maybe reducing some replication of some of the requirements in here. So, and maybe the whole financial guarantee thing could be left out because it's stated in the ordinance that developers get to do that. So I don't understand why it's in some of them and not in others. So maybe that's something we can talk about bigger picture on how to resolve that.
I think the short answer is we can look at that for future cases. I think Russell's right. If it didn't say, if none of the conditions said anything about a financial guarantee, the ordinance authorizes that as an option for the developer. So in other words, you couldn't approve a plat saying, no, we don't want the financial guarantee, we want you to build it.
Right.
Because that gives the option. So I think however we need to reword those to indicate that there is a financial guarantee on each of those is.
So, Russell, what you're basically saying is that the conditions are merely clarifying and stating what's already stated in the ordinance.
Yes,
Is that correct?
All of them are, Russell?
They are, but then some of them aren't. And as Mr. James indicated, we allow the financial guarantee. It's specifically stated in some, but not in others. So if we don't restate it as part of these conditions, I don't believe it takes it away as being a viable alternative. So it may be a moot point, but I just want to be perfectly clear that it's still available and a viable condition to the process.
The financial guarantee for the hydrant is specifically included 5 and at 6, specifically included for the sewer.
Okay?
Water is also specifically included for the financial guarantee.
So,
So I don't know which ones do you see that it doesn't someplace say financial
I
guarantee?
think what Russell's saying is that item 3 talks specifically about the hydrant, but doesn't talk about the guarantee. And then the hydrant is mentioned again in 5, and the option for the guarantee is offered there.
Correct, correct.
to me, the simple way to do it would be to strike 3 and 7 because they're already stated in 5 and 6.
Okay? You guys opposed to striking 3 and 7?
Well, fire code is still gonna apply, that's what 3 is talking about.
And I think 3 provides some additional detail on locational requirements that
Right.
isn't necessarily covered under whichever one talks about the fire hydrant number 5. I suppose an alternative would be to combine those two so that that locational information is still there.
Right.
Again, the intent is for that to be allowed to be deferred with a performance guarantee in any case. So we could either add the performance guarantee language to 3
It seems like the
or to
easiest
combine
solution.
with 5.
We just add the guarantee option, financial guarantee option to 3.
That would work.
Okay with you guys?
So,
And then on 7 says install water and wastewater service lines. 5 and 6 say prepare and submit plans for water and wastewater.
This may be a question just for our engineering services, and I think if they're okay with combining that.
And we're not trying to get out of anything, we just want clarity and allow for that financial guarantee
Okay.
for it. So, yes, thank you.
All right.
the way it's written, it is a little confusing, even number 2, because you have 3 alternates in there.
Morning, Andy Vasilio, Engineering Services, Assistant City Engineer. There is a little bit of duplication in the language, but essentially it's the standard requirement of water and sewer lines and services. So again, I apologize for a little bit of duplication there, but typically what will happen is if they want to do a financial guarantee, they'll submit the plans, they'll get approved both by us and fire. Comment number 3 came from fire, 5, 6, and 7 came from engineering. So that's why there's a little bit of
There's overlap.
duplication. 3 is more detail because that came from the fire department. So with regard to the financial guarantee, yes, that is standard as long as they submit the plans. If there's fire hydrants included on the plans, then we coordinate with the fire department and they will review as well and approve the plans. Okay. So from our perspective, we will work with fire to address these concerns.
Thank you, Andy.
Thank you.
So let's go back to item 2. This second alternate would be to allow the submission of the plans and install the sidewalks, having that deferred construction prior to final certificate of occupancy.
And the way these are worded those are alternatives for the developer. So they can choose any of those and it would be considered to be consistent with the conditions of approval.
Okay.
In other words, it's not, in some cases, we give you an option to apply this standard or that standard. In this case, it's the condition for the developer is basically you have to meet one of these. You have to meet the primary standard from the ordinance or one of these alternatives defined.
Okay. Does that work for you, Russell? Okay. Does anyone have any more questions or wish to speak in favor or against on this case? All right, I'm going to close public comment. Have a discussion among the board here or a motion.
Make a motion to approve.
Okay.
And if I could clarify that includes adding the performance guarantee
Yes.
language to both
Everything that we've
number 3 and
discussed
7.
that you agreed to, yes.
We have a motion and a second to approve with changes to the conditions of approval as we've discussed. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? None. 7-0. All right, revised preliminary plat. Nope. San Angelo Gateway Edition, Section 2. Public hearing and consideration of a request for approval of a revised preliminary plat for Gateway Edition, Section 2 being 153.114 acres located north of Gateway Drive and Venture Drive. Mr. Fisher.
Morning again, Planning Commissioners. This is our second case, revised preliminary plat of the San Angelo Gateway Edition, Section 2. The original preliminary plat was approved back in November of last year by you all, and it was about 206 acres. It included the AEP property, which has now been developed. The applicant came back, that's Costa DC, wanted to take away this internal street. Basically what they're doing is, in the future, as these lots get sold off, no one really knows how those internal lot configurations are going to be in the block layout. So rather than coming back each time and having to revise the plat in order to make it conform, they took out this internal street, which they're not sure if they're going to build, and also some of the internal lots here. So they're reducing the lots from 20 lots down to 5, and that's consistent with AEP anyway, which is a larger lot. It removes that north-south street Prosperity, and the rationale is to allow greater flexibility in the sale of lots and the lot configuration. So it will come down to 153 acres now when we take off the AEP property, which was already developed. And I understand there's an MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, between the city and Costa DC that's in the works. Once that's approved, that'll set the parameters for any future road extensions and water and sewer connections as they go through final platting in the future. So just FYI on that. We looked at conformity with the comprehensive plan. Most of the site is designated industrial or campus institutional. There's a small strip of commercial as you go along towards on the west side adjacent to the loop. All of those designations allow commercial or industrial research and development type uses consistent with the current San Angelo Industrial Park. The overall street network remains unchanged. It's just the internal lots and that one street that was taken out. But the sewer lines and the roads will stay roughly the same. They're 80-foot right-of-ways, so they'll allow a wider paving width for commercial and industrial traffic, given this is in that park. And the streets will all connect to Highway 67, and that'll allow larger vehicles and commercial trucks and transport to move across town easily. Staff recommendation is to approve this revised preliminary plat for San Angelo Gateway Edition, Section 2, and there's no conditions of approval. Any questions or comments?
Anyone have questions for Mr. Fisher? All right. I'm going to open it up for public comment. Please state your name.
Morning, I'm Bob Schneeman with the city's Economic Development Department, and I'm here primarily just to answer any questions that the board may have. We certainly appreciate all the support we've gotten from the planning staff working with us on this. And the good news is we're almost out of land to sell in phase 1 of the industrial park, so we're very excited to get this project moving. As Jeff said, we do have a memorandum of understanding our legal department is working on right now between the city and the Development Corporation to guarantee the construction of all the streets and utilities. And we're about to let that contract out for bid to do the first phase of those improvements. So I'm here to answer any questions.
Anyone have questions for Mr. Schneeman?
All right, thank you,
sir. Anyone else wish to speak on this case? I'm going to close public comment. All right. Discussion among us or a motion?
I make the motion to approve.
Second. All right. We have a motion and a second to approve as presented by the staff. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. 7-0. Bentwood Country Club Estates, Section 16-F. Public hearing and consideration of a request for approval of a final plat of Bentwood Country Club Estates, Section 16F, and two variances. A variance from Section 93A1 of the Land Development and Subdivision Ordinance to allow King Mill Drive, Wedgewood Court, and a connecting street to function as a private drive, and a partial variance from Section 103A2 of the Land Development Subdivision Ordinance to allow Beatty Road to be widened by a portion of the full required incremental half-width being 8.782 acres located at Kings Mill Drive and Wedgewood Court.
Good morning, Planning Commission. Hillary Bucher, Senior Planner. We are looking at a plat here in Bentwood Country Club Estates. We're looking at 8.782 acres. We're at King Mill Drive and Wedgewood Court, so you can see the previously built streets that were cul-de-saced. The zoning for this area is RM1. The future land use is neighborhood. It's an SMD number 1, Tommy Hebert's district. Oh, I'm sorry, that's Country Club neighborhood. So we are looking at unplatted tracts and previously platted lots being platted into 35 lots. They are also requesting variances from Chapter 9, 3A1 to allow the private street, and 10, 3A2 to improve Beatty Road by 5 to 8 feet, depending on the area, instead of the required 10 feet. So Beatty Road would be adjacent here. So the plan is to connect these two cul-de-sacs and have the lots off of those. So staff is recommending approval of the plat. RM1 zoning allows for a mixture of residential uses, which is consistent with the neighborhood. It's a continuation of the existing development around it. Additional lots will accommodate for new residences, and the new streets will improve connections within the development. So they will no longer be cul-de-sacs, but a through street. The rationale for the Chapter 9 variance, staff is recommending denial of this variance. Private streets are in conflict with the current adopted ordinances, which do not allow them. The conditions upon which the variance is requested are not unique to this property. There is no hardship related to this variance, and staff believes a private street does not meet the provisions, again, of the current ordinance. Chapter 10 variance, Beatty Road will be improved by an additional paving width and curbs, so we are recommending approval of this variance. It also, the current alignment of the road sits closer to one side of the right-of-way versus the other, so this will allow them to improve it relative to their lot lines. The full expansion of Beatty will require the road to be very close to the private property and leave no room for the maintenance. So if we were required the whole half, it may get really close to the private property. And Beatty Road will pose no safety risk with this addition. This addition is actually a continuation of a previously approved variance that allowed the widening, just not the full incremental width. So staff's recommendation is to approve the final plat of Bentwood Country Club Estates, section 16F, denial of the variance from Chapter 9, 3A1, and approval of the variance from Chapter 10, 3A2, subject to 10 conditions of approval. So the first condition is the tax certification. Number 2 is build the proposed street as a public street or request a variance. Correct the street names or request a street name change. They're currently showing on the plat King Mill Circle. If approved as a private street, seek a right-of-way abandonment. Show the drainage easements or request the releases. Design and install the water mains. Design and install the sewer main lines. Number 8 would be install the water and sewer service lines to each lot. Number 9, submit a drainage study. And 10, the gates that are limiting access, if it is approved, should be controlled by Opticom to allow public service in very quickly. Does anyone have any questions?
All right, no questions for Ms. Bucher. I'm gonna open it for public comment.
Good morning, Russell with SKG Engineering. We'd like your approval of the 2 variances that we're requesting, the one out of Chapter 9 and the one out of Chapter 10. Ms. Bucher spoke about the one for the Beatty Road street widening, and we support and thank staff for working with us and being supportive of that variance. The other would be to make this or allow this to be private gated roads. And so, yes, that it is in conflict with the current ordinance, and that's why we're asking for the variance. Bentwood has established, is really a established master plan community that has a history of doing things right, and even a history of private gated communities. There's a reserve in Bentwood, and there was a segment of Overhill just to kind of the south and east of here that was approved as a private street. So the right-of-way is adequate. The street is built to construction and inspected and approved by the city. So everything is to city standards. Right-of-way, or the width of the reserve tract that would be kind of the private land, since it's not dedicated to the city, it's reserved as private ownership. It's dedicated out as a separate tract. You know, the worry is, well, what if it becomes an issue, the homeowners association doesn't take care of it, people want to take it back? Well, that's really should be a non-issue, because everything is there as if it was a full-on city street. The benefit to the city and the taxpayers is they don't have to pay to maintain that. That's taken care of by the homeowners association. So it's really, in our opinion, a win for the city. And so we would appreciate your support of that variance request. And then kind of tying on to what we had talked about, the earlier plat, the one for the water and sewer services kind of being replicated without the allowance or the inclusion of the performance guarantee. So we just like to have that added in, and be happy to answer any questions. Oh, I'm sorry. I also want to bring up, we met with staff and the city fire marshal about this location. King Mill Drive and Wedgwood Court have a 4-inch water line entering into them. And so we'll connect those two with a 4-inch line as well to make a loop. That'll be adequate to serve the number of residences for domestic use, but it wouldn't be adequate for fire flow protection. There's fire hydrants on Overhill near each at Wedgwood and King Mill. And so we're real close to the 600-foot hose lay, but based on our meeting with city staff, the fire chief, Dunn, indicated that they would be satisfied with the current fire hydrant configuration and wouldn't require additional fire hydrants. But fire hydrants are stated on item 6, so we just want to make sure that that's clear and not a reversion of what they had told us in the previous meeting. Be happy to answer any questions.
So the gates you're wanting to put on each of the entrances in there, is that the plan?
Yes.
Looking at that plat? So
Yes, there would be a gate somewhere in here and somewhere at that location, and controlled with the Opticon, respond somehow to the fire department's strobes, and they open up. Thank you.
Anyone else wish to speak in favor or opposed to this case? If you please come forward.
Hello, my name is Brian Vincent. I'm one of the owners of the lot there, and just want to make the comment. First, thank you guys for taking a look at this. Again, as Russell said, I think the city has Bentwood has some pretty good history of having these types of gated developments. Two of the owners that are part of this group that's developing this property are also owners of Bentwood, so there's been a lot of communication back and forth with Bentwood too as well. But as it relates to this property, it's really it's a very kind of weird property in that it's not something that you would say, okay, you're just going to go develop just standard lots there. In order to make it sort of meet the master plan of what I think what Bentwood's trying to do and what we're trying to do as a group, we really wanted to create a unique property here that's gated, that kind kind of targets active senior living. So, with those types of people, first of all, we want those people retiring here in San Angelo. We don't want them going off to, Marble Falls or wherever. And so I think it's good for the economy. It's good for the city. It's the type of people that we want to encourage to come stay and retire in our area. So security is a big part of that, and having something unique is a big part of that, which is kind of the vision of what we were trying to develop here. And just to echo what Russell said, everything is going to be built to city standards as far as the streets. I think from a hardship perspective, with residents that are living in this area, there's the type of homes that are going in there are not going to probably, the HOA type costs are very unlikely to create a hardship in any way with those residents. In the event that it would, as Russell said, just echo what he said, it's an upside for the city because everything's going to be built to city standards, and we're going to maintain it. So if there's any questions, I thank you for your consideration. I hope you would approve the variance.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Vincent?
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak in favor or opposed to this case? All right, we're going to close public comment. Anyone have any comments or wish to make a motion?
I'm going to make the motion to approve with the variance request from the LDSO, Chapter 9 and Chapter 10, to improve Beatty Road 5 to 8 feet in width in lieu of 10 feet.
Second.
Whether or not it's going to be a private street or variance.
And in improving, I would also like to approve it being a private street with the motion.
On your criteria for approval, you should make a finding based on the testimony and the plan that
Water and sewer, maybe.
that the public interest is served by providing that that street would be a private street, or both of those streets would be private streets.
The motion needs to
The
include
maintenance and
that the public interest is being served.
public interest may be served to a greater extent by the alternative.
Okay.
So
We need
in
to
other
state
words,
that in
you're
the
making
motion.
a finding that the public's, that those streets being gated would serve a public interest.
So you're referring back to it like a 911 call or something like that? Is that what you're referring to?
No, those arrangements for approval from the fire department, all of that,
Okay,
the way they would get in and out, that's already,
okay.
that would be covered at that time before they get their certificates that they need. So, no, all that I'm referring to is that normally the streets are dedicated public, and the provision is that every lot has to have direct access to a publicly dedicated street. This is a variance, so you need to make a finding that that variance does serve a public interest, and that's why you're going to grant it.
Okay.
I make the motion to approve with the variance request because a good argument was made by the developers and also in the motion, I would like to state that the public interest will be preserved.
Okay. That
from the LDS, from the LDSO Chapter 9 and Chapter 10 to improve Beatty Road 5 to 8 feet in width in lieu of 10 feet. Is that?
Going to suffice? Okay, we have a motion to approve. Have a second? Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. 7-0.
Thank you.
Thank you. Rezonings. City Council has final authority for approving of rezonings. Z 18-21. First Financial Trust, public hearing consideration of a request for approval of a rezoning from General Commercial Heavy Commercial CGCH zoning district to the Single Family Residential RS1 zoning district to the Neighborhood Commercial CN zoning district located at 909 West Beauregard Avenue.
I'm going to remove myself for a possible conflict of interest.
Okay.
I have to do the same.
And Mr. Urick. Okay. We still have a quorum of 5. We're going to continue forward with Mr. Fisher.
Thank you, Planning Commissioners. Our next case today is a rezoning Z1821 for First Financial Trust. It's on 1.47 acres at the southeast corner of West Beauregard Avenue and South Park Street. The rezoning, current zoning is CGCH, except for the bottom 50 feet, which is RS1. The plan is to rezone the entire lot to CN Neighborhood Commercial. It's an SMD number 5, Lane Carter's district in the Santa Rita neighborhood. So the future land use is neighborhood center. So rezoning to CN would be consistent with the neighborhood center designation. The current zoning, as mentioned, is CGCH and RS1. These are some of the photos looking west. So it fronts onto West Beauregard Avenue, major arterial road, lots of commercial and offices along there already. North is the Civic League Park, and this is looking southeast at the property. I'd say about 40 to 50% of the property as you go east to the bridge and south is currently undevelopable. There's a lot of trees. There's also a really steep grade. So it's pretty much the paved area that you see in the front corner that is developable at this time. Staff recommends approval for the following. It's compatible with the plans and policies, as I mentioned. Neighborhood center CN, zoning is CN, consistent with the zoning ordinance. The lot would comply. It's a large lot. It would comply with all the CN standards. It was also exempt from platting. The engineer and I had done some research, and she was able to find the old deed records and prove that lot configuration was there before 1950, as per the subdivision plat, so no platting will be required in the future. It's compatible with the surrounding area. It's located along West Beauregard Avenue, commercial corridor with retail, office, and restaurant uses. The change conditions, it used to be an used auto car dealership. It's been sitting there for some time, so believe that the CN would be more appropriate anyway and remove the heavy commercial. We really don't want the CG and the CH portion in that CGCH. So we think the CN's a little more compatible. This is more of a local neighborhood area. No effects on the natural environment anticipated. Most of that area, as I said, in the front is already paved. I believe there's a community need given there's already commercial development of that local commercial nature that would fit in the CN already along Beauregard. And development patterns shouldn't change. Access off of Beauregard, we anticipate most of the traffic would use Beauregard, not the local street to access the site. 10 notifications were mailed. We did receive one in favor. I've passed on to you from this property owner across the street. Staff recommendation is to approve the rezoning from the General Commercial Heavy Commercial CGCH and Single Family Residential RS1 to the Neighborhood Commercial CN zoning district on the subject property at 909 West Beauregard. Any questions or comments?
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Fisher? No? All right. Thank you, sir. I'm going to open it for public comment. Anyone wishing to speak in favor or oppose on this case, please come forward, state your name.
Good
Morning, I'm Steve Eustace, and I represent the current ownership of the property. We're under contract to sell this property. The property is owned actually by Dr. Dwayne Dotson's estate and his brothers, and their estate is managed by First Financial Trust. It's kind of fitting that we have it under contract actually to the property owner contiguous to the south. And that's kind of fitting because that's where the Dotson home estate was, and this was part of their large property holdings there. Of course, they sold the house many, many years ago, but kept this as an income-producing property. It's been an eyesore for a long time, and I think, you know, getting that building torn down is going to be a great thing for the neighborhood. I don't often come here and argue to downzone a property about 3 zoning categories, but keeping it CGCH is really a bad situation. And it's also really good that the contiguous property owner to the south would be the purchaser, because one of the problems with the property, and you don't even see this, is about 55% of the property slopes about 30 feet down to the river. Vagrants camp there. There's a lot of illegal activities. It's just been a problem for the whole neighborhood, and the contiguous owner will take responsibility and help solve that problem also. So be glad to answer any questions, but I think this is a good thing for the neighborhood.
Anyone have questions for Mr. Eustace? No? Thank you, sir.
Commissioners, Heidi Brooks. I live down the street from this property and actually office across the street from this property. My question is, you are just voting on rezoning at this time, is that correct? It has nothing to do with the building that will go on after this building is removed?
Correct.
That is correct.
During the zoning.
We're just rezoning.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Stephen McLaughlin. I am the property owner in number 7 on the list. You already have my approval on file. I just wanted to support that again and say, from my perspective, I can see into the back of the building, so I've watched vagrants go in and out of it through the years, and I'm just very supportive of anybody that's got the wherewithal and a vision to come in and clean this up. It should be an important street corner for San Angelo in our history, and I'm excited that somebody's going to do something with it. I just wanted to voice that support. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McLaughlin. Anyone else wish to speak on this case? All right, we're going to close public comment.
I move to accept as presented.
All right, we have a motion and a second to approve the rezone as presented by the staff. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. 5-0.
One moment, we're going to get the other 2 commissioners back.
All right. Z18-22, Sepulveda, City of San Angelo. Public hearing, consideration of a request for approval of a rezoning from the single-family residential RS1 zoning district to the two-family residential RS2 zoning district located at 701 to 721 West 15th Street. Mr. Fisher.
Commissioners, rezoning 1822 Sepulveda. This is 1.61 acres. It's at the south of West 15th Street between Shelton and Brown Streets in the Blackshear neighborhood, Lucy Gonzalez's district, SMD number 4. The applicant wants to rezone from RS1 single family to RS2. Let me just go to the next map here, which will zoom out. So the applicant owns one of these properties in here that's vacant, 711 West 15th. The city looked at this further, and they wanted to go to RS2, Well, there's already an RS2 lot here. There's about 3 properties that have 2 dwellings on them within this 3-block radius. And because it's so close to the commercial development here, the city has co-joined in the application with Mr. Sepulveda to rezone this entire block to RS2. So it'll be his lot as well as the rest of the lots on the block. Now, just to confirm, most of you all know this, the RS2 zoning doesn't necessarily require that they be duplexes or 2-family dwellings. They can still build single-family dwellings. They can build single-family dwellings with an accessory apartment, or they can build 2-family dwellings on those lots. So there's a little more flexibility. This is looking west and east down the street as it stands right now. Out of all of those lots along the block, almost 3/4 of them were vacant. As you go up 3 blocks and you go all the way to Bryant and then west to Shelton Street, there's still about 30% of those lots are empty, and they've been sitting empty for some time. So staff is in support of the rezoning for the following reasons. We look at the future land use. It is neighborhood, allows a diversity of housing stock, and a balance of use as appropriate in that area. All of the lots would be compliant, whether it's RS1 or RS2, so it'd be compliant with the RS2 standards. As mentioned, compatibility with the surrounding area. This is still a low-density residential neighborhood, and given that it's so close to commercial, I think if it was surrounded by, unless it was maybe a corner lot, but we've had other applications in the past come in and they've got RS1 on all 4 sides. Their RS2 may not be appropriate, but given the transition between commercial and single family, we believe that it is in this case. Change conditions, as mentioned, most of those lots that are vacant have stayed vacant for decades. So there's been no applications to come in. We don't anticipate any effects on the natural environment. We believe there's a community need for the reasons we just described. And finally, the development patterns wouldn't change. The lots have already been platted. 22 notices were mailed out. We did not receive any back in favor or opposed. So staff recommends approval of the rezoning from the single-family RS1 zoning district to the 2-family residential RS2 zoning district on the subject properties from 701 to 721 West 15th Street. Any questions or comments?
Any questions for Mr. Fisher? All right, we're going to open it for public comment. Anyone wish to speak on this case, please come forward. State your name.
Richard Sepulveda. I'm the owner of the property. When I acquired this property, I acquired several of them from the city at the same time, and I was kind of going back and forth looking at what I could do with this specific lot. There's vacant houses next door. There's, houses in poor condition next door as well. And so when I went to the drawing board, I designed one house and realized that it wasn't cost effective for me to build a single family home, and that the only way that I could make it work was doing a duplex. So when Mr. Fisher, saw everything as well, I decided to maybe even possibly look further into and probably acquiring those lots as well and just kind of developing those. I think it'd be good. Like I said, I don't see anybody doing anything with those properties as a single family. That's it. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak on this case? All right, we're going to close public comment. Anyone have a discussion or motion, please?
I'd like to make a motion to approve as presented. Seems like it would be a really good thing to do.
All right, I agree. All in favor? We have a motion and a second to approve as presented by the staff. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? 7-0. Additional uses. Planning Commission has final authority for approval. Appeals may be directed to City Council. CU 18-19, Foley. Public hearing consideration of request for approval of a conditional use to allow for a wireless telecommunications tower related facilities in the Central Business District zoning district located at 107 South Irving Street.
All right, Hillary Bucher, we're going to move on to conditional use 1819 Foley. It is a conditional use for telecommunications facilities atop a building. It's located at 107 South Irving, 0.2 acres. It's southwest of the intersection of South Irving Street and West Beauregard Avenue, SMD number 3, Harry Thomas in the downtown neighborhood. I just passed out a letter from the applicant, their office out of Chicago, so they were unable to make the meeting today, but he wanted to make sure you had those copies as well. So the future land use of this area is downtown, and the current zoning is central business district. We're going to look at some site photos just so you can get an idea of the building. We're looking at the northeast corner. The second photo here is kind of a pedestrian view. So if you're standing at the building looking straight up, that's how tall we're looking at. This is the southeast corner, and again, the northeast corner. So you can see there's already equipment atop this building. What they're doing is adding some additional antennas. The previous installation did not receive a conditional use. Was not here at the time, so I'm not sure of that exact reason, but we are looking to add to these existing what I would call a sled, the structure. So you can see that little circle that's on there is actually the addition, so it'll be very minor compared to what's already there. They're going to put one at this end and one at that end with the connecting cables in between. So these are some of the specifications for the antennas. You can see the round antennas are about 26, 25 inches wide, so about a 2-foot antenna. And then these little boxes will be added as well, but are about 9 inches by 9 inches. So we are recommending approval. We believe the proposed antennas are being added to the existing facilities. That should not affect the structure. Telecommunications facilities are allowed in the central business district with the approved conditional use. It's mostly commercial area surrounded by other telecommunications facilities. We don't anticipate effects on the natural environment. With the existing and new development of downtown, there's a community need for additional telecommunications systems. And again, telecommunications facilities currently utilize rooftops throughout the downtown area. So we mailed out 9 notifications in the area and received 0 in favor and 0 in opposition. In regards to this, though, I want to point out that through this process, we were notified of some facade problems that this building is having, again, not related to the roof, but there was I believe, a piece of the parapet that had fallen as well as some bricks. The building official is here, I believe, if y'all have any questions, but we were notified of that. So staff is recommending approval of case CU 1819 to allow construction of telecommunications facilities in the central business district zoning, subject to 2 conditions of approval: that they work with the Building Permits and Inspections Division to ensure the telecommunication facility meets the requirements of the building permit, and that the current configuration of existing equipment may remain, but if they move any of it, we would like to ensure a 10-foot setback so that it'd be less visible from the street view. Now, that being said, if this board would like to talk about or reference adding conditions in regards to the building itself, we can again talk about those things. But the telecommunications facilities is atop on the roof, and the building itself, again, has had problems. The building permits and inspections has been working with them. So does anyone have any questions for me?
Go ahead, Conley. Okay, my question is concerning that building altogether, because it is in very much disrepair.
Okay.
Interior, on the interior, for sure. Okay. And, you know, it has been listed for sale for a long time, but it is listed to be totally gutted and redone because it's uninhabitable. So the roof is in good condition, is what you're telling me, and it can support all this?
Well, and that's the reason that planning staff added the condition number 1. I don't have the structural details of the roof, but we want to ensure that they work with the planning, with the permits and inspections division as well.
Is there a conditional use now?
No, sir, there is not.
That building in downtown, that is, the reason those people even own that building is they're making money because it's a glorified antenna. They have no desire for downtown San Angelo. They have to help downtown San Angelo. All they want that building for is to have a glorified antenna. And if they weren't making money on it, then they might think twice about owning property in downtown San Angelo. So with me, I'm a hard no. And if they have any other towers on top of it, they need to get them removed.
That was my other question, Hillary, is those that are up there without a special use permit, how can those remain there?
Why haven't they been removed?
That's a good question. We have not, to my knowledge, not looked back into that to see why, if perhaps those were installed prior to the requirement for a conditional use permit.
If they were, would that be a grandfathering of sorts?
Yes, yes. Now, if they were installed at a time when a conditional use should have been required, then we could, if we determine that to be the case, we could pursue either enforcement to have them removed or for them to come in and apply for conditional use for those as well. Correct me, Hillary, but did we word this in a way to approve not only the new but the
Yes,
pre-existing
sir,
as
to
well?
allow telecommunications facilities atop the roof.
So
So if you approve this as presented, it would fix the
it
past
goes back.
issues as well.
Yeah, I got
But obviously, you wouldn't have to do that.
So what I understand is the Chews own this property, they own another on Tewig, and they own the old, the property on Beauregard and
Butterfield Buildings.
Coningham. And they got them from the RTC 20 years ago or thereabouts. And they look like hell. They have no desire to help downtown San Angelo, and this might be an opportunity to get them in line or to sell the property. But the only reason they have that property is because it's a glorified tower. And I'm a hard no.
Okay.
When was the conditional use permit required for the antennas? When did that begin?
I don't know.
Okay.
So
Charlie's here, and she's been working with the building at least previously, so she can explain at least what she's gone through.
Charlie Camp with the Building Permit Department. To give a small background, Joanna Jackson, when she was with the Fire Marshal's Office, went out there in 2015. There were some concerns about the facade at that time. Unfortunately, the building code doesn't require a permit for the facade, so she talked to the owner about getting it fixed. To my understanding, they glued some of the brick back. Well, that's not going to maintain anything. So about 6 months ago, Samantha Schwartz with the Fire Marshal's Office, she does the dangerous building program, brought this to my attention. I asked her at that time, could this not be umbrellaed under the dangerous building? And she said it doesn't meet the criteria, and I'm not exactly sure why. I did reach out to the owners, explain to them that we have some concerns, some of the bricks falling again. She explained to me that she was going to try to get somebody here to fix it. We did contact Street and Bridge to barricade the sidewalk at that time. But as of right now, there's not a permit required, and again, Samantha Schwartz said, under the dangerous building program, there's not much that they can do either. As far as like the gutting of the structure, I've understood from the Fire Marshal's Office that they did go and remove that. They had issues with the elevator. So instead of, the state went in and inspected it and had some concerns, so they actually went and tore the elevator out. So the building itself does have some issues.
yeah, and the concern I have about this building, if we're allowing a telecommunications facility on top of the building, workers have to access that roof somehow. And if we have an unsafe building, which I believe we do in this case, it's a health and safety hazard to allow these guys to go into the building to get access to the equipment that's on the roof. This is not a good idea, in my opinion. I don't think it's safe to allow workers to go in and make access to the roof of this building in its condition.
And so the towers that are up there right now also belong to Sprint, and that's who's requesting this, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am, that's my understanding.
Okay, that's who's on the tax records, is Sprint Spectrum.
So I think as usual, I'm the lone wolf. So I think we're getting way off subject, right? I mean, we're not in the business of demolishing buildings. We're not in the business of telling anybody what they can and can't do. If there's a brick falling off the roof onto the sidewalk, well, that's called, somebody's going to be calling a lawyer sometime, right? And I don't think we're up here to start telling these folks what they can and can't do. My question is, why does the planning commission, why are we even, and just give me a history, why do we even have to hear these, right? It's an existing roof, there's already antennas on the roof, they're making a modification to something that's already up there. Why does this even come here?
Yes, sir. When you're required to get a building permit for the addition, they're adding stuff along the floor as well, not just the antennas. So when they add those new wires and the new expansions, that triggers the conditional use process.
Seems like an extra step for, you know, whether we like that building or not, that is still a customer. And it just seems like an extra step for the customer that I don't agree with. But that's here nor there, right? I'm not here to change the rules
And
either.
just so the commission's
Just
aware,
pointing it
this
out.
building is historically overlaid, so they had to go before DHRC for a river corridor and a certificate of appropriateness previous to this. So they've had a couple of steps they've gone through at this point.
For the telecommunications facility?
Yes, sir, because the building is in the river corridor and the building is a historic property.
You're telling me that both of those commissions approved what you're presenting to us before you brought it up to us?
They approved the look of it.
Okay.
That's what they're looking at, is how does it affect the overall look and historic value of the property? So they still have to go through this board. It's a separate process. And they could choose in what order to go, so.
So my question again is, with the conditional use, do they have permission to have their antennas that are on the building now, do they have permission to be up there?
Well, and I'm sorry, my zoning ordinance, for some reason, usually it has at the very end when the ordinance was adopted, and for some reason, we looked and it does not have that. So I'd have to do some additional research to that effect, but,
I think the likely answer is they do not have permission that should have been required at the time.
Okay.
But what we're doing with what's proposed here is you guys have presented it in a manner that we're approving what was done before and the additional
Correct. And
equipment.
that's not unusual for us to find situations where a builder, developer, contractor, somebody did something without the proper approvals, and then when they come in for an approval like this, we'll fold it all together and get you all to approve it all. Again, that's assuming you agree with that approval. So I think you can look at this in some ways as if there are no structures on the top of that roof.
Right.
Because you're basically approving all of them or none at this point.
Okay. I'm going to open it up for public comment if I haven't already.
Thank you, Travis. I appreciate that. Harry
Yes, sir.
Thomas. And this is my district. And I have to agree with what you said, Travis. Safety is paramount for me. I want to know whether or not we've done an engineering study to make sure that that particular roof will support any additional antennas and those things that are up there. If we haven't, I think we need to do that. If we've already had issues with this particular building, we need to make sure that it's safe, not only for the citizens that are walking in that area, but for those individual people that have to go up and service those antennas.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else wish to speak on this case? If you please come forward. All right, I'm going to close public comment. We're going to continue the discussion, I guess, among us here. Or we can have a motion. Yes, Hillary.
you guys are good. I was just up here if you had questions.
Okay. So as I've said previously, I'm concerned about health and safety, and this is a vacant building that no one else occupies.
That's not true. The homeless occupy it, and they're going to build fires in it, and they're going to burn the thing down, and they're going to have a real problem, especially being across from the
Library.
courthouse and
Yeah.
library. And
it's true.
I make a motion to disapprove.
A second.
We have a motion to deny and a second. All in favor of denying, please vote.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Lone Ranger.
No, I approve.
Oh, okay.
No, I just had a point to make.
We
Nobody
had-
wanted to hear it,
so
but I made it.
We were 7-0 to deny this.
Right,
Welcome
yes, sir.
to my world.
Thank you. All right.
so with that being said, Will everybody that wasn't grandfathered, all the antennas that are not grandfathered, will those permits be looked into and denied, and will they have to remove the
Equipment.
equipment?
I guess my answer would be we will look into that to see what our options are and pursue any enforcement action that we can,
Okay.
given the circumstances that we find out in terms of researching when the permit was issued, why it was issued, and all of that.
What
But
is
we
it-
will-
what
we will
are
do
your
that.
options to enforce an illegal antenna?
Well, there's provisions that basically give preference for telecommunications. And we may, in fact, need to get information from the company about, if they could have an option, if it's not safe, for their structures. We just have to look at their structures. We would probably be required to give them an option to, if they need to reinforce their roof or do something, and also provide an access for their maintenance on their facilities.
But in any case, that's going to have to come back before us before they do any of that work? Are they going to remove the equipment that's up there?
They can appeal to the city council, and we would try to cover that ground before it goes to city council. Or they can decide that that's not a good location for them, given what they know now, and relocate it.
They also got to get approval from the FCC, don't they?
Well, and that's what I was going to add, is that the FCC has some specific regulations, and particularly what they call a shot clock. Basically, the city has to approve or deny telecom permits within a certain time frame. So it may be the situation where those previous permits, we may have lost our ability to say no because of that timing issue. So
If there was a permit.
correct. But so if they, well, even if we didn't issue a permit, if we fail to either issue or deny a permit within a certain period, anyway, the short answer is we need to look at some of the FCC rules as well to see what our options may be in the case of those existing towers on the building. But we will definitely look into that.
Okay, and will you report back to us so we know, please?
Yes, we can do that.
Thank you.
All right, CU 18-20, Zipper. Public hearing and consideration of request for approval of conditional use to allow for approval of a conditional use to allow a skating rink with accessory retail sales and service in the light manufacturing ML zoning district located at 316 North Bays Street. Ms. Bucher.
We will move on next to CU 1820 Zipper. Again, it's a conditional use to allow the skating rink. It's 0.34 acres northeast of North Bay Street and Spalding Street, SMD number 3, Harry Thomas's district in the Fort Concho East neighborhood. So if you'll see right here, kind of a landmark would be the old Central Football Stadium. I believe Central and Lakeview use it now. So the future land use of this parcel is neighborhood, and the current zoning is ML. So these are photos of the property. You can see the skating rink here. This property is owned by the ISD, and then there's an independent commercial property there that you can see with the fencing. So this is the front of the building, and then we'll talk about this approach a little bit later. One of staff's recommendations is to approve this to allow ADA access into the building. So this was the site plan they did. I believe their addition is additional ADA accessible restrooms. So they're not adding a whole lot of their use. They're actually improving their business. The skating rink has been in existence for a long time. It's been used on and off, I believe, throughout that time frame. They're also stating here that there is parking along the street. This alley is not improved, and back here, this is the railroad tracks, so it's kind of a darker area back there at night. So staff is recommending approval of the conditional use. The building was used as a skating rink on and off since the late 1950s, early 1960s. Surrounding uses have worked together since that time. The skating rink is allowed in the ML zoning with an approved conditional use. The compatible surrounding educational and commercial uses have differing peak hours than the skating rink would. We don't anticipate negative effects on the natural environment, and the continuation of a use that has operated on and off since the 50s and 60s, I believe, demonstrates a community need. The skating rink is a logical development in an area surrounded by ML and RS2 zoning. So we mailed out 5 notices. We did receive 1 in favor from the railroad, so we did receive that one, and 0 in opposition. So staff is recommending of approval of a conditional use to allow a skating rink with accessory retail sales and service in a light manufacturing zoning district, subject to the following 2 conditions of approval. They shall work with the Building Permits and Inspections Division to ensure that the facility meets the requirements for their building permit, and the applicant must improve the adjacent alley approach to allow handicap access from North Bay Street. So if we go back to the picture that we were looking at, since they are parking on the street, we believe that that handicap accessibility would be a great addition to their building to allow for their use. Does anyone have any questions?
That would be on the north side?
Yes, ma'am, it would be on the north side of the building, so this alley right here.
Anyone have questions for Ms. Bucher? All right, we're going to open it up for public comment. Anyone wish to speak in favor or opposed on this case, please come forward. State your name.
Judy Zipper, owner of the skating rink. And we just wanted to, I don't really know what to say. We're just looking at improving the restroom facilities and adding a little bit of, just squaring off the building, adding some additional space in there, floor space area, and just hoping to improve on the condition of the restrooms for the kids and families coming in. So,
thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone else wish to speak on this case? All right, we're going to close public comment.
Make a motion to approve as presented.
We have a motion and a second to approve as presented by the city staff. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? 7-0. Partial reconstruction. The Planning Commission has final authority for approval. NCU 18-01 Weeks, Bright Mara LLC. Public hearing and consideration of a request for a partial reconstruction of a non-conforming use multifamily apartment complex under Section 605B2 of the zoning ordinance on the subject property zoned general commercial, heavy commercial, CGCH, and single-family residential RS1 zoning district located at 3608 North Chadbourn Street. Mr. Fisher.
Thank you, Commissioners. So this is a unique case. It's an expansion, or excuse me, it's a partial reconstruction under Section 605 of the zoning ordinance. So unlike a expansion of a non-conforming use, we're actually increasing the footprint. There are particular cases where, usually due to damage, due to an active weather element, that the applicant, if they're trying to reconstruct a portion of the building, they're not increasing the footprint, but they're trying to reconstruct it, and it's more than 50% of the appraised value, they have to come to you all in the Planning Commission. I think the last one we had was probably my first case here almost 4 years ago, and so here we are today. You may be familiar with this apartment complex on North Chadbourn Street, just south of East 37th and Chadbourn in the Lakeview neighborhood. It's on 1.118 acres. There was tornado damage, I understand, last year. The applicant has worked with our permits division and is getting the required permits to do some of the work. They've already gotten a permit to fix the roof, and there'll be some other plumbing and some other permits, as I understand, to fix the interior of the building. So the future land use is commercial, and the current zoning is CGCH and RS1. We looked through historical records. We couldn't pinpoint exactly when that building was built, but as far as we know, it's non-conforming, so they do fall under 605 of the zoning ordinance. This is the front building. There's 2 residential units in there, as well as, I believe, a management office, and then as you go to the back, there's another 20 units, so a total of 22 units on the property. If they were to entertain a rezoning in the future, and they don't have to, say to the closest zoning category, RM1, they would actually meet all of the RM1 standards already, so it's just an FYI on that. Staff is in support of the approval of the partial reconstruction. They've got adequate parking on the property. and they meet all the current setbacks as mentioned. There's also a little playground area they may choose to fix up in the future with a swing set on that corner facing East 37th. So there's only two criteria for a 605 approval, that the rebuilding and the restoration complies with the zoning ordinance, and also that the applicant has made every effort possible to remove any nonconformities. So the current improvements will not expand the footprint of the building as mentioned and would comply with the closest zoning category RM1. The applicant has come in to get all the necessary permits, so they're doing their best to comply. We are recommending two conditions of approval though. Two of the parking spaces turn into ADA spaces and are striped and signed just to bring it up to current code. And two, there is a freestanding sign on the property where the pole is right on the property line, but the sign actually extends into the right of way. So that would require an encroachment approval. The applicant can either, can shift that sign back, and then depending on the setback, they may need to get an approval. Either way, they'll need a sign permit for that sign, but we would be willing to work with them on that. 19 notices were sent out. We didn't receive any in favor or in opposition. Staff recommends approval of a partial reconstruction of a nonconforming use, a multifamily apartment complex under Section 605B2 of the zoning ordinance on the subject property zone general commercial, heavy commercial CGCH, and single-family residential RS1 zoning district on the subject property with three conditions of approval. I can read those in if you'd like, and this concludes staff's presentation. So basically obtain the remaining permits from the permits division, which they've agreed to do, provide the two additional accessible parking spaces to ADA compliance, and fix the sign issue, either move it back and obtain a sign permit for the Bright Mara sign that's now into the bracket. And that concludes the presentation.
Jeff, could you go back to the current, the color where it shows, which is, I can't talk, commercial or whatever. The building on the
Zoning.
corner, the zoning, thank you, big word. 2 syllables.
There it is.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you.
Is this, was this building condemned? Why are they coming before us?
I think the building official is here to answer that question if you'd like. There was some history on it, I understand, with permitting.
I think I can answer. The short answer is the building was damaged enough that they needed building permits to do the reconstruction, but we could not issue the building permit because of their non-conforming status.
Got it. Thank you. Anyone have any other questions for the staff? I'm going to open it up for public comment. Anyone wish to speak in favor or opposed on this case, please come forward, state your name. All right, I'm going to close public comment.
Okay, now I have a question.
Okay.
I think I can talk since Hillary's helping me. Okay, is there a way to, as we're discussing this, if we choose to go forward with approving that, can we also change this particular zoning to RM1 so that it matches what it is?
No,
Done it in the past.
That's not a request before you, so that would have to come back as a rezoning that is not part of this request.
Okay, I just know that it has been done in the past. That's why I was asking.
I think and maybe you're speaking before my time here, but normally there are certain state law requirements we have to meet for a rezoning, and those notifications haven't happened. We may have brought cases like this with a companion rezoning at the same time, but we did not do that in this case. We did offer the property owner, we explained to him his options. He could seek this as kind of a temporary fix, but that would leave him still non-conforming, or he could seek the rezoning instead that would kind of fix it for good, and he chose to go this route.
So if we decide to go in and allow the repairs and everything to be made, then basically we're grandfathering the nonconformity again, correct?
Correct, but if it somehow gets destroyed again or partially destroyed, he would have to come back through this same process.
Okay,
What-
seems like a mess.
What's the
to me.
criteria for
Why you do that?
non-performing status?
I wouldn't
do
do that.
it.
if-
Basically, if it was legal when it was built, but then the zoning has changed over time, so this may have been built before there was even zoning in the city, but for whatever reason, this back part of the property was zoned for single-family residential. So now the idea is any future development on that property should be single-family residential, but the building that was already there and legal at the time is allowed to continue as is. But if it's demolished or partially destroyed, they can't rebuild without either rezoning it or this approval that's before
Isn't there a
you
time
today.
frame in there too? Because the building's been uninhabited, correct?
That's right, but there's two different types of nonconformities. There's a nonconforming use, which is what the building is being used for, and there's a nonconforming structure. I think in this case, what we're addressing is the nonconforming structure. Is that?
That's right.
Then if there's an issue with the use, that would be dealt with separately.
But the use as being an apartment right now is non-conforming, so that would be.
That's right, and if it's
two
been vacant
things
for
that are
more than 12
non-conforming.
months, they would have to address that issue as well.
And how long has it been? Do you know,
We
Jeff?
did our best to look, we'd made some calls to utilities and water billing, and it, depending on when that water was actually shut off, it may have been more than 12 months. It may have been within a 2-week period. It was that close.
Okay. I'm shocked that they haven't come in to rezone this. They're investing a lot of money in making improvements to this property with a non-conforming use. It puts money at risk, in my opinion, to invest in this improvement and not have conforming zoning. It's just, I think it's a little dangerous, but.
Staff's preference was we had recommended the RM1 just because that, I mean, literally everything, parking, setbacks, everything would meet if they came in with an
Right.
RM1 today.
Right.
But like I said, the applicant had this option as well and had chosen that option.
Yes, we'll open it up for public comment.
Owner of the property. We're not opposed to rezoning at all. It was just a timing issue. There were holes in the roof, there's skylights. We were looking just at the fastest way to actually get in, pull permits so we could start, basically secure the property. And we want to get it secured, put the roof on. The fastest way to get the permits was just the 605. So, but by no means, we're not opposed to doing the rezoning.
Okay.
In fact, that was the plan. I talked to Jeff. Let's get this passed first, pull the permit, start the work, and then, as I understand it, it takes longer to actually do the rezoning. That has to go before city council. There's more hoops to jump through. So we were just looking, just the fastest way to get permits to start the process.
Okay.
You're right. When you invest this much money, we might as well fix all the problems, not just the aesthetic problems and the structure, but the zoning too. So we are planning on doing that.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
All right. Anyone else have questions or comments, or anyone want to make a motion?
I'll move to approve as presented as long as, I mean, obviously, I think that the owner understands the potential and the risk that you brought up, because I completely agree with what you said, and I think that he has a clear understanding of where he's moving, so I'll make a motion to approve as presented.
Okay,
I have a question again.
Yes.
For staff. Okay. So with this motion and second in place, is there a way, after we vote on this, because I know it's on the floor, but is there a way also to encourage the owner to do the rezoning ASAP? It does require us to vote and then 2 votes from city council, but, I mean, that seems to need to be done.
I think formally, officially, there's nothing you can do other than express what you just said. Having said that, if it turns out that the building has been vacant for more than 12 months, this process lets them get going on building permits. It would not allow them to reoccupy the building without the rezoning, again, if in fact it has been more than 12 months.
Yes.
That should be sufficient
Okay.
incentive.
Okay. That helps. Yes. Okay, so we have a motion and a second to approve as presented. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. 7-0. All right, text amendment. City Council has final authority for approval of text amendments. Public hearing and consideration of a text amendment to Chapter 12, Exhibit A zoning ordinance establishing new standards for regulating mobile food trucks on public and private property in the city of San Angelo.
All right, Hillary Bucher again. We're going to move on to the proposed text amendment regarding food trucks. This presentation was presented to a public forum, so we're going to go through it pretty precise on what we're looking at. You have the text in front of you as well. So we're going to start with operating locations. So these will be mobile food trucks. For the current zoning is interpreted that mobile food trucks can only be where restaurants are allowed, so retail, sales, and service. The proposed revisions to the zoning would be that mobile food units could operate in all commercial zoning districts, all manufacturing and industrial districts, and in residential zoning districts under certain conditions. Some examples would be churches and schools, only up to 4 hours in a 24-hour period, at least 100 feet away from a home, and in apartment complexes, only 4 hours in a 24-hour period. With with all of these on the private property, they would be required the property owner's permission, which is on this first slide, the second slide. They can operate from one location for up to 3 consecutive days, but must then vacate that location for at least 3 days. So a mobile food unit must move and be mobile. Again, they can stay in one spot for 3 days and then vacate that for 3 days. If they are parking on property, it requires an all-weather surface. So that could be caliche, asphalt, concrete. So on-street parking rules per mobile food vendors. No on-street parking in one location for more than 4 hours in a 24-hour period. So they'd have to, again, not take up a parking space for more than 4 hours. No on-street parking within 50 feet of an entrance to an operating restaurant. No on-street parking near a private or public school without written permission of the school. And no on-street parking within 200 feet of homes or apartments except in downtown. So again, this would be on-street. The previous slides were talking about private property. So some public safety things we've looked at. Mobiles and customers cannot block fire lanes, driveways, sidewalks, adjacent parking spaces, streets or alleys, etc. So the unit itself and the customers that are congregating in it cannot block any of these. As well, mobiles cannot block visibility at the intersections. So some additional rules, they must have trash cans and clean up the trash associated with their business. As well, we're proposing that you can park in the parks within designated areas. Those areas would be designated later by the Parks Department. So hours of operation, what we're proposing is to abide by the current noise ordinance for residential areas and parks. So you would be allowed to operate from 7 a.m. to 10:30, but after that, that would be taken out of there. And then other areas, staff recommends at this point no restrictions. So moving on to the next piece of this puzzle, mobile food trucks at their commissaries. So mobile food trucks wanting to operate from one location for more than 3 consecutive days must be at their commissary. So the commissary is something that they work out with the health department. It's where they clean, where they prep, do a couple of different things. This is the only spot at which a mobile food unit can park for more than 3 days consecutively. Commissaries must be located in an area that allows restaurants, so retail, sales, and service. And if they're parked at their commissary, they must be parked on a paved surface. If you're at your commissary for more than 3 consecutive days, you must abide by the zoning rules. So setbacks and parking and fencing, signs. There's a couple of other additions that would apply versus you being a mobile food truck and being moving every 3 days. Finally, you must comply with special rules within districts such as downtown and river corridor. So if it's a mobile food truck that's moving every couple hours or every couple days, they would not have to go before the DHRC. If they're parked permanently within the river corridor, then we would look at their colors and materials of their proposed location. Does anyone have any questions? I know that was kind of fast.
On page 1, down at the bottom, it says that a mobile food unit shall not locate on any property without written permission. So if they want to stay longer than 3 days, they could have a written notarized permission slip, basically, from the owner, and they could stay longer.
No, ma'am. If you are a mobile food truck, even if you are parked on private property, but you are considered a mobile food truck, you don't have as many rules. You don't have setbacks and parking and other things. So you must move every 3 days. But with each instance, no matter where you're parked, if it is not your property, you have to have property owner permission. The only place you can stay more than 3 consecutive days is at your commissary, and those differ depending on what you're serving and different things. So there's other regulations for that. There's other city departments that are going to review food trucks, obviously. Health department, building permits and inspections, fire marshal. These are just, we're kind of looking at the land use rules. There's a couple in here that may go to the operational side. But again, we're just looking for your recommendation of approval for these proposed changes to forward on to city council.
So do they have to have a permit every 3 days to wherever they're moving to?
Not a permit. Every property they're parked at, they have to have the property owner's permission.
Right.
And their permits
But
are
if they're
through
at the park?
At the park, we're proposing that they park in designated spots, so the Parks Department would designate spots. And that was the Parks Department's, their recommendation. Yes, ma'am. So property owner permission for every property you're parking at. And then if you want to stay more than 3 consecutive days, you must operate at your commissary.
They're hired to provide services for a private event. Like if I were to hire one of the caterers to come to my house for 6 hours, would that be allowed?
I think that we were talking about special circumstances may be allowed through special permits. Did we talk about catering at residential homes?
We did have that discussion.
I know we did too. I just can't remember exactly.
Hi, Aaron Vannoy, Planning and Development Administrator. Yes, we did talk with the Health Department about that, and since it's a private event, the food establishment does not have to be permitted by them, and therefore they would not fall within the zoning requirements because it is for a private party, not a public party. That would be the difference.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Anyone else have questions for Ms. Bucher?
So what's the time frame on the final ordinance? I mean, how, do you have a time frame on when?
Yes, sir. We are looking to go to council with a draft ordinance, the second reading in December, which would be December 20th, and then final adoption would be in the January meetings, depending on how they fall. The food permits expire annually on January 30th, I believe. 31st, okay. So they expire annually, so these news rules, they would at least know about with their new permits.
Okay. Believe I have to open this up for public comment, don't I? Yes. So, I'm going to open this for public comment. Anyone wish to speak in favor or opposed to what's being proposed? Please come forward. I'm going to close public comment. Any more discussion or a motion?
Make a motion to approve.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve as proposed by the city staff. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed?
Thank you,
7-0.
Commissioners.
Annexation plan. City Council has final authority for approval of annexations, annexation plans, and annexation programs. Discussion and possible recommendation on an update to the city's annexation plan and adoption of an annexation program. Mr. James.
And I'll explain a little bit why we have those confusing terms. Oh, going the wrong way.
So the annexation plan for the city was last updated in 2009 when we did an update to the comprehensive plan. Since then, there have been some changes in state law that define exactly what an annexation plan is. And basically, in short, it means when you adopt an area within an annexation plan, you must annex that area within 3 years. But there are some exemptions to that rule of what needs to be in an annexation plan. So in short, we will be proposing an annexation plan that simply says no areas subject to that state law are planned for annexation within the next 3 years. But the other thing that means is what we normally call our annexation plan can't be called an annexation plan. And so we've looked at other cities and basically they've gone with the term annexation program, which is the more generic sort of long-term, here's the areas we think will be annexed sometime in the next 20, 30, 50 years. And so again, we'll be adopting this annexation plan that meets the state law, but then this annexation program, which will basically replace our existing annexation plan. Part of the reason is this, as we've discussed with you all in the past, we've looked at subdivisions which we regulate in the entire ETJ, which goes out 3.5 miles. We think there are some areas outside of what we think will be annexed in any time in the near future, even near being 20, 30 years. And so we think there are areas that we can no longer regulate and just give that back to the county's authority. And we've been in negotiations with the county about this, and they've looked at the map that you're going to see. They're comfortable with it. And so basically, we would amend our agreement with the county to give the city the authority to review subdivisions within our annexation program area, and then the county would review subdivisions outside of that area. One other reason that we're looking at this is in 2020, once our population officially goes over 100,000, by state law, our ETJ will go from 3.5 miles to 5 miles. We already think, as I mentioned, there are some areas at the extremes of the 3.5 miles that we're fine not regulating. Once that goes to 5 miles, it will pull even more areas within which we would be regulating subdivisions if we don't pursue this agreement. So I described the difference between an annexation plan and annexation program. I think I just already told you everything that's on this slide. Basically, we will be deferring to the county for some of the areas within our ETJ where we have the ability to regulate, but we're not required to regulate. So here's the overall map, and I have some zoom ins so we can see it a little closer, but this is basically the area in gray that we would be talking about. So we would exclude, in particular, some areas that are completely developed for the most part, some subdivisions here, out in this area, a little bit down here as well. We've seen a number of re-subdivisions, replats in this particular area. I think our feeling is if there are existing lots that somebody wants to split or combine or whatever in that area, there's really not much for us to look at. Every time they come in, they're looking for variances because the roads don't meet city standards. They're too narrow. And we think that given the fully developed nature of that area, there's really no reason to keep that in. Similarly with some of these other areas I mentioned out around the community. We did pick a couple of areas where we definitely want to make sure that we include. If you've seen some of the preliminary maps of future interstate corridor throughout the community, it looks something like this, taking the outer loop, it comes up, something like that. And so we wanted to make sure that if we do get an interstate corridor at some point in the future, having that being developed within the city limits, or at least the possibility of that in the future, would be important for future growth and economic development of the city. And so in those areas, we wanted to ensure that those were included. That's kind of the overview. Again, we have some zoom-in maps here. If we have particular questions about particular areas, but with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Streets would have been nice because you only have just a few streets on there.
Oh, the street names?
Yes.
Yeah, I think they're actually labeled, but they're probably so small, if you zoom in, you
Didn't
can't
zoom out
read them.
enough to
Yeah.
get any of them except the Loop and Brewery Garden.
So what you're proposing is an agreement, basically, that we have with the county, where we abandon the plans to annex portions of what would otherwise be an area within the ETJ.
Well, it would be to give up regulatory authority over subdivisions
Hmm.
within the areas not covered in gray. The city would still ultimately have the ability to annex those in the future. I mean, the state law gives us the authority to annex anything within the ETJ. We really can't change that. But it would not be in our long-term plans at this point. And again, this map could always be updated in the future. We're updating it now from 2009. I don't know if that answered your question, but.
It does.
Okay.
It's not in the gray area, correct?
Correct.
So you're giving up, we're giving up the authority to regulate that area. The gray area to the left, we're gonna keep in our.
That's correct. So if a new subdivision came in, or a replat of a lot within this area came in, once this is adopted, they wouldn't even have to come to the city. They would go straight to the county, do it, the subdivision through the county's process, wouldn't even have to come to us at all.
So, John, in your gold little dashed lines, that is the city limits, are there new properties that you're thinking of annexing in the next 3 years?
No, at this point, we have not identified anything to be annexed within the next 3 years. Now, again, there are some exemptions that doesn't mean we couldn't annex some of those areas within the next 3 years.
Right, but you're not
we have
putting
not
them
identified any.
as the plan, because we'd
Correct.
have to do that. Okay.
That's right.
And then the ETJ is on this map, since we're still below 100,000, is it still 3.5 miles?
Yes, the ETJ, which is this outer boundary
Mm-hmm.
here, that is the 3.5 miles. And so you can just picture it being somewhere out here, as 5 miles once that happens.
Okay. So basically, we're just approving what's already there.
We're approving what's already there, but even less. We're giving up some of the ETJ in effect.
This may change when it goes to 5 miles.
Well, this would have to come back through this process. So even when the ETJ goes to 5 miles, our intention is the gray area would still remain
Right.
the same.
But you got to go through this process again when it
No.
goes to 5. No.
No, we would not.
Okay.
This would not have to change. The ETJ boundary changes automatically. That's per state law.
Right.
And so the annexation program map, which is the gray, would stay the same. We could bring it back, but we don't have to.
Okay. Anyone else have questions for Mr. James? So you're looking to us to approve the annexation program map as
Correct.
you've presented.
Correct. And then we would then pass it on to city council for a final.
I actually already thought it was 5 miles.
It's not, because our unofficial population estimates put us at over 100,000, but for the purpose of the ETJ, it either has to be the official census, which will happen in 2020, or the city council has to formally adopt a resolution recognizing our population being over 100,000, which they have not done.
Okay. I'm assuming I need to open this for public comment.
It's actually not required, but you're welcome to.
Okay. I'm going to open it for public comment if anyone wants to come up and speak. I'm going to close it. Closing public comment. So now,
I make a motion to approve it.
all right, we have a motion to approve. We have a second? We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 0, so 6-0. All right, on to the director's report.
The only thing I had, I think a number of you have met her before the meeting, but just want to introduce our newest planner, Sherry Bailey. Comes to us from Amarillo, and so we're happy to have her, and you'll be seeing more of her in future meetings.
Thank you. Welcome aboard. All right, future meeting agenda and announcements. The next regular meeting of the Planning Commission is tentatively scheduled to begin at 9 a.m. on Monday, December 17th in council chambers of the McNeese Convention Center at 501 Rio Constro Drive. Adjournment.
Make a motion.
All right, we have a motion.
Second.
And a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. 6-0.
10:49.